The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
We're gonna do that even again. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
All right, welcome. Go ahead and grab a snack if you haven't, and find a seat. There are, I know, a number of us that couldn't make it tonight. I hope we'll be viewing it a little later. We're recording this, right, Lauren? Great. We're recording this to be viewed later by those who can't. Hello to those of you online. We've got Julia Dinsmore and Randy Gullickson up here in the corner for us, the teeny boars, but so that they can participate with us also. Thank you for arranging your lives to make this possible. This work, we believe, is really important. Following the recommendations of Vision 2025, as well as our council and our racial justice and equity team. So thank you. And it's important that we embody anti-racist things in all of our work, right? So that there is not only acceptance, but empowerment and equity in what we do together as a way that we embody God's goodness and love in this world. So thank you for making this a priority tonight. We have with us CLNE, the Center for Learning and Neighborhood Engagement. So keep that acronym in your brain and file it away. There's at least one more big one. But CLNE, which was founded over COVID, right? Just before? March 2nd of 2020. So just as COVID was beginning in Northeast Minneapolis, and they exist for a number of reasons, but in part to help congregations like ours make good connections and partnership with community and with other congregations for learning opportunities and to further our own goals and who we want to be and become and what we want to do in the world. So we are partnering with them and their community. And as a first step, we're starting the IDI together. So that's the other big acronym today, the Intercultural Development Inventory. And there are a number of you who've already taken it and perhaps maybe not here tonight for that reason also. We will be gathering the results from an assessment we will all take and learning first steps, next steps that will be recommended to us from the results of this data to further our learning and our anti-racist work together. We've got with us tonight Liz Kelly, Schumacher Fuller, who I had the pleasure of being a YAGM or a Young Adult in Global Mission with in 2008, 2009, but she is now, looking at the wrong Kelly, she's now the Director of Programming and Volunteer Development for CLNE, and also Dan Bielenberg, who is Director of Learning and Equitable Social Change. I won't do your whole introduction. I'll let you introduce yourselves. Sure. But they are here to lead us in this introductory work. Would you pray with me, and then I'll hand it over. Gracious God, help us breathe. These days are busy and full of demands and full of opportunity, should we have eyes to see it. Show us who we are and who we may become in you and because of our neighbor. Use this time together to give us encouragement as well as imagination as we take these first brave steps. Grant us vulnerability and also compassion. Gratitude also for those who have raised their hands to be there, to participate in this work, and to help lead our congregation in it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Now, thank you. And I'm going to let you further
Pastor
introduce
Rebecca.
yourselves. Take it away.
Awesome. Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see your faces in person. Rebecca already introduced us, but Kelly and Dan, and I'm so glad we haven't done so many in-person things for a while. And so it's really nice to get the energy in the room. And I love Mark's energy already from the front row there. So tonight we're going to be talking about being the work together and how we're going to navigate cultural similarities and differences using the Intercultural Development Inventory. The IDI. We're going to call it the IDI mostly, but Intercultural Development Inventory. How many of you in here have already taken the IDI? Just so that we know what we're a couple. Okay, a couple. So we're going to choose to go to like the least common denominator and like really set the foundation so that everybody can be leaning into this work together. And as we enter from wherever we've come from, Pastor Rebecca already kind of grounded us in prayer, but we want to do just a little orientation, some somatic work as we enter. And Randy and Julia, we see you on Zoom too, so you're not forgotten. Just do some grounding work as we enter together. And so I'm going to invite you to do what we call orienting to our space. So it's a embodied somatic practice to kind of like, whew, here we are at Normandale, which is maybe a place that you've called home for a lot of years or not so many years, but how are you entering tonight? And what are you noticing tonight? So I invite you to kind of take a deep breath in and out, to notice your butt in your chair and your back, whether it's free floating or against your chair. And I invite you to keep your eyes open and scan around you for about a minute. Kind of go to the left and to the right, above you, below you, and behind you. And just, do it at your own pace. Continue. Let your eyes linger where they want to linger. Notice what you're noticing. Maybe it's friendly faces you're excited to see. I love that energy. Maybe it's, oh, I didn't notice the carpet was that color, or, oh, there's something on the ground. But wherever your energy kind of is, just kind of take a moment, again, in all of the directions. Take another breath in and out, and just be present to the space you're in. And maybe notice if your body feels a little bit different after taking a minute. If there are ways you feel more secure in just noticing where you're at. Sometimes we enter spaces and just kind of go right to it and we don't take time to settle in. So just notice if your body feels any different. And then we're going to roll into some work together. Rebecca already sort of talked about this, but I'm going to put Rebecca and Mark on the spot here about your why at Normandale. So if you just want to turn around or however you want to do that, about like why we're gathered here tonight. Dan and I will get into it too, but from your perspective, what'd you bring all these people together for?
Thank you. I don't rehearse this, and
Perfect.
It doesn't get asked a lot outside, so forgive me for stumbling here, but we're in a space, we're in a community. As I always say, the world has gone on in a certain way, personally for my life, since I was a kid, and it looked one way then from a racial perspective and a racial experience, and I sort of was living in a parallel universe for a long time after that, and until a couple of years ago. And I think for everybody, George Floyd's murder and what followed from that made everyone wake up and say, hang on a second, things have to be different. But how are they going to be different? And what are we going to do? And so this is an initiative by our congregation to say, look, we all said that things have to change and things are going to be different. And it doesn't happen by itself.
Right.
And it starts with introspection, asking questions, challenging ourselves. And it's sort of like an onion. There are people, or actually someone the other day said, it's like a highway and an on-ramp. And, and he has way better metaphors for it than I do, but this idea that people are different in different places. And so we're here to become engaged with this, to do it from a perspective, as I said, introspection, learning, engagement. And this we understand to be a very good place to start, and to go from there, as opposed to just charging in and saying, here we're going to start doing things. Okay, I'm going to stop there.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Mark.
We're really looking forward to this partnership with CLNE because, as I think we've said, this is not something one should make up on their own. There's others that have been out there doing this, being engaged with it, making mistakes, learning, having successes. And we're really looking forward to you to help guide us there and help make us be more efficient.
We're going to accompany each other.
Talk about that word.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. That was beautiful. And so I want to talk then, we'll get into our whys as CLNE, but that's a great framework for why we're here. I don't know how well you all know each other. So I'm just like putting that out there. So we're going to do introductions just for the sake, at least of Dan and I, so that we know who's in the room. And hopefully, maybe if you don't know everybody's in the room, maybe you'll learn something new, even if you do know everybody. So our questions to introduce ourselves before we go on in CLNE's why and kind of get into it. Name and pronouns, your connection to Normandale. So I know some of you are on council, some of you are on staff, some of you are in the racial justice equity team. There's kind of different touch points. So like what brings you here tonight in terms of that invitation? And then one thing, so we're going to keep it short because there's, a number of us. What's one thing that's brought you joy recently? And I'm going to put our lovely folks on the screen on the spot to go first, if you would. So Julia, would you start us off?
Randy, go for it, and I'll go after you.
Nicely done. Okay. Pardon my voice. I've got COVID, but I'm feeling good. But it's in my throat right now, so I'm a little.
Oh.
Randy Gullickson, him. I been a member at Normandale for over 20 years, or about 20 years. I have in the past for a number of years served on council. I served on the reconciling committee a few years ago, which was more focused on the LGBTQ welcoming statement, although the statement itself that came out of that is broader than that. And one thing that has brought me joy recently is my stepdaughter is going to be giving us a grandchild in September.
My name is Julia Dinsmore. Hello, everybody. I've been kicking around Normandale Lutheran Church in Edina for, over 10 years now in different capacities. Right now, I am a very part-time justice liaison and have been assisting people to get more understanding about our neighbors and about our own selves in a variety of ways. We have a really wonderful coffee clutch that's been meeting for over 2.5 years now after services on Zoom every Sunday. And then we used to get together every Wednesday on the porch and learn together and grow together and build relationships. And now I'm part of this RJET community, and I look forward to growing with everybody else. And I just, I'm excited. I wish I could be there in person, but I'm actually avoiding COVID because I'm worn out and fat. Pass.
Oh, what's something that brought you joy recently, Julia?
One of my zinnias that I planted by seed bloomed today.
Hey. This is joyful. Feels like summer with all the zinnias blooming. Now I'm going to turn it over to you. Do we just want to go on a line? Is that maybe the easiest way to do it? Okay. Dick, will you start us? Dick has a name tag on, so that's very easy for me.
My name is Dick Peterson. Can you hear me? Well, Barb and I, my wife, first joined Normandale in 1968. But we were gone for about 12 years in retirement and came back 6 years ago. And we don't think there's any higher calling for clergy and laity than to work for justice for those who are suffering innocently from injustice. And there's no bigger problem that we face. And we would like to see Normandale more involved. And so.
That's why you're part of the justice team, right?
Yes. Well, first before that, when the porch started, I looked into what that was, and that fit right into that. So I've had 18 months of the porch as a credentialing, and so now I'm on the justice team. So.
And what's something that brought you joy recently? Oh.
Something brought you joy recently.
Something about what?
Brought you joy recently.
Well, just 2 days ago, Pastor Rebecca came and visited Barb and I. Barb is suffering from Parkinson's and some dementia. And, that's the biggest joy in a long time.
Oh.
Not going to be able to talk after that. My name's Rebecca Gamble, one of the pastors here. I think I know you all. I'm here in staff capacity, and I suppose also the RJET capacity. Something that brought me joy recently. This sounds a little backward, but we've been without power for about 36 hours, and we just got it back. So,
Yay!
Mark Worley. We've been a member of Normandale for 30 some years, 1990. Married here. Pastor Price married us. Been mostly involved in mission and outreach for a long time, and then now in racial justice and equity, and happen to be the chair of this group, so which is an honor and a lot of fun. Really great group of people, and I'm looking forward to what we're going to accomplish. Joy, a couple of weeks ago, I did a paddleboard event on the Columbia River in Oregon. It is the hardest thing I've ever done for like 3 hours and 45 minutes, and I'll tell you about it some other time.
That's awesome.
Right.
Hi, I'm Linda Van Gilder, and I'm a member about 25 plus years, hard to believe, on the Racial Justice and Equity team, and also recently started supporting the foundation and kind of a back office support role for fun. Joy, I just did a girls cabin weekend. I think we're 30 years and counting, and just belly laughter.
Hi, I'm Kathy Ritter, and I've been a member with my husband Mark for about 10 years here. And I will also, along with Randy and many other people, was part of the welcoming committee for the Reconciling in Christ. And I'm now a member of the Racial Justice Committee. And something that brought me joy recently is yesterday I helped my youngest daughter set up her first classroom for her teaching job.
Hi, I'm Susan Howell, and I have been a member of Normandale for about 18 years. I've been active in the choir and done some traveling with the choir. I've been on the Global Mission Committee, and I was asked to be on the Racial Justice and Equity Committee, which I'm really excited about. Something that's brought me joy is I have had 2 grandbabies this summer. So one on Mother's Day and one on the 4th of July.
Oh my gosh.
So added on to the 6 we already had. So I love babies. So I've been enjoying as much snuggling as I possibly can with those babies.
Hi, I'm Nancy Auska, and I've been a member of Normandale since the early 90s. And I, like Dick, joined the porch at the very beginning. And so I've had a couple of years of being immersed in this work and am on the racial justice team now, and very happy to be there. My joy came at my 12-year-old grandson's baseball game when he hit a home run.
Oh,
Oh, Lauren, are you checking in, Lauren?
Nice to invite.
He's working.
Yeah.
Somebody has to. I'm Greg Peterson. I joined the staff of Normandale this summer, full-time as Director of Worship and Music. after a year of part-time work here. And so I'm relatively new. Part of what brings me joy is connecting with people, and this summer has been an opportunity to both connect with new people here and make connections. But we've also had some family reunions and time to be with nieces and nephews we haven't seen in a while, and that's been a very joyful happening. So glad to be here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Why is this so hard? Okay.
That's your-
Sounds
It's just what you sound like, Sumner.
Sounded okay for everybody else, Sumner. Everybody.
As my customized name tag says, hi, my name is Sumner. I've been in part of Normandale. I don't know. It's been a century, so I don't know when. But what's brought me joy, seeing good friends that I only normally get to see the upper torso of.
That's
in
true.
various ways and shapes. But also Greg's comment made me remember that last weekend I got to meet my grand niece.
Oh.
So that was really cool.
Yeah.
My name is Carrie Warnke, and I'm on staff here, and I'm she, her pronouns. And what brings me joy is my kids right now and summer and being around them. So
I'm Susie Baker, and I'm a newer member to Normandale. I think I joined 3 years ago. My husband and I joined. Newer member to the council, so that's why I'm here. And I spent a joyful afternoon playing Brio trains with my almost 3-year-old grandson today.
Nice.
It was a blast.
That coming up.
Hi, I'm Lisa Pedersen. I've been with Paul since he became a pastor here for, has it been almost 12 years? 12 years. I'm also on staff here at Normandale. I'm the director of the toddler preschool program. I was a member of the Porch for over a year. Enjoyed that greatly. Julia is a dear friend of mine, so it's good to see your face. And a lot of you here that were there with that. Something that's brought me joy is we just got back from a 2-week vacation in our new camper van. And then yesterday I got to see all 5 of my grandchildren, which always brings me joy.
I'm Paul Pedersen with Lisa, and we've been here for 12 years. I'm a pastor here at Normandale. I guess what brings me great joy most recently is 3,700 miles together on the road for 2 weeks, and we still like each other.
Yeah, that's solid.
Hi, I'm Karen Nelson. I'm she, her, and I'm here on behalf of Church Council. My husband and I and 3 kids have been members here since 1991, so 30 years-ish.
Yeah.
What brings me great joy is my kids. We were all together over the weekend and expecting a first grandchild any day now.
Woohoo. So much grandbaby
And there's
joy.
a lot of grandbaby.
I'm Lowell Stortz, he, him. Deb and I were part of the freshman class of 1983 at Normandale, and we're still here. Had fun, a couple tours of duty on council and teaching Bible school and Sunday school. And what brought me joy within the last week is I saw one of the young men who was in one of my confirmation classes. And I'll never forget what he said. We were trying to teach them that you don't have to just thank God or ask God for something. You can praise God, or you can just tell God something when you're praying. So we went around the room and we're all supposed to pray without thanking or the normal prayers. And we got to this young man and he said, God, I just want to tell you how happy I'd be if the Vikings won. So, that memory brought me joy.
I am Phil Larson. I've been a member since '82. I've been involved in church choir, been on the Porch, and now I'm on the racial and justice equity team. Really enjoy doing that. What brings me joy is I just found out my daughter and my grandson and my son-in-law are heading to Kenya to visit my son-in-law's dad is sick, but they couldn't get a passport they were flying tonight and they were getting a passport. They could only do it the day of. So it went through and they're heading out too. They're getting there. So
Well,
my
suspense
daughter
there.
is not
Goodness.
sweating anymore, but so that's bringing me joy. And so I just hope it's a safe trip and everything goes well. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is David Myrie.
David.
I've been a member at Normandale for about 20 years. And during that time, I've taught Sunday school with Randy Gullickson up there. And that was a fond memory. What brings me happiness is just the Minnesota summers, really. June, July, and August are hard to beat. It's really pretty out, and I'm retired and I golf and play tennis. So I'm happy about that. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Lily. I use she, her pronouns. I've been around Normandale for a long time, but I'm full-time on staff starting this year in the CYF program. Something that's brought me joy. This past weekend, I was maid of honor for my cousin, and that was really special. So.
And last but not least, Kim Sannerud. She, her. It's actually the first time I've ever been asked for my pronouns. So yeah, cool. I have been on various committees and doing volunteering and am part-time staff here now for coordinating worship participants. And my most recent joy was Bob and I celebrated our 23rd anniversary. Yes, I'm sorry, 43rd anniversary yesterday. And we did some really cool biking around Hastings and visited a brewery, which most people know I like.
It's an excellent way to celebrate.
You have a mic on too, don't
That's
you?
right. I don't need to use this one. We'll just leave it here for now. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Bielenberg. I have been with CLNE not since the very beginning, but coming up on 2 years now. And a real short version of my story is I been a Lutheran my life and worked in the corporate world doing training and leadership development and that kind of stuff for many years. And I was connecting with your story, Mark, about just kind of living in a parallel world, and then the drumbeat over the last, I will say, 7 or 8 years, realizing what racial justice, injustice looked like. You know, from my point of view in the Illinois suburbs, the Chicago suburbs, it's hard to see. But I started paying attention, and that was in parallel with me attending seminary, Luther Seminary. My wife and I moved here to the Twin Cities in 2019, and just in time for COVID and for George Floyd's murder. And we live in Minneapolis, so it was quite an interesting intro to the city. And that's when I met Pastor Kelly Chapman, who invited me to work here. So I'm a deacon in the Lutheran Church, and really enjoy what I'm doing here. It's, my why is I think this is God's work. God is at work, bringing justice and bringing people together. And it's my joy to be a part of that. And my other joy, my kind of day-to-day joy, I too have a grandson. He's about 14 months old, and we get him every Tuesday, and that's a good day. Tuesdays are always good.
I'm Kelly Schumacher Fuller. I go by Kelly SF in our CLNE world because Pastor Kelly is also a part of our mix. We have a small staff and 2 Kellys. Tell us more. Stand there.
That's your mark. That's my mark.
Okay.
I told you I wasn't a wanderer, didn't I? All right. Okay.
I like
so
it.
whoever's talking, we're going to stay there.
I think I'm okay back here. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, well, I mean, he showed me. See, you can see me on the camera. I am a member at Redeemer Lutheran Church in North Minneapolis and have been a part of that congregation on and off for over a decade now. So I've known Pastor Kelly as my pastor, and my husband and I had moved away from Minneapolis. My husband is also a Lutheran pastor type. And we moved away for his first call, and we moved a couple of other places and moved back here to help start CLNE March 2nd of 2020. So it's been a little bit different journey in that way than we expected, but we'll talk a little bit more about CLNE. But what I love about this work is I get to connect with so many people who are grounded in similar faith, morals, values, the gospel. We get to talk about Jesus in this work and how it connects us and calls us into who we want to be in the world. And that is exciting That's fun. We don't, when we go to church and sometimes we don't talk about that fun stuff, but like, gosh, the cool stuff that we get to do together because we've got that grounding. Oh, it's good stuff. So that brings me joy, but the joy, I was connecting with Julia's joy because my dahlias, it's the first year I've ever planted dahlias because they always seemed like fussy because you have to dig them up at the end of the year, but my dahlias are blooming and it's exciting. Hooray. So, but to say a little bit more about CLNE and who we are, we'll go here first. This is the rest of our team. So you're getting Dan and I today, but hopefully you'll interact with all of these people and a few more. Pastor Kelly Chapman, PK is what we call him. He's our executive director. And if you know Pastor Kelly, maybe you don't, he's been a Lutheran pastor for more years than I should probably count. Then he would appreciate me counting anyhow, but he's an amazing leader and we're so excited to follow him and his vision in this work, but you all will get to know him too. We have a board, the CLNE board meeting is tonight, so he's really sad that he couldn't be here, but he had to be there. Dr. Robin Bell, who is a pastor, a theologian, a professor. Lana Field, who has been in the Lutheran world also for a very long time doing youth ministry things, working at Augsburg College around vocation. Winfred Payne, who is a former Black Panther, former convict, and an incredible youth leader. He took his story and brought it into how he connects with community and young people. Rachel Spano Moynihan, who is somebody that practices embodied anti-racism and somatic practices. So hopefully you might get some flavor there too. And Richard Webb, who is our IDI guru in lots of ways. He's trained us in the tool and has been using that tool for 25 years, I think. So,
and has made it work in a lot of institutions.
Yeah,
really
and a lot of
life.
Lutheran institutions too. And we all come together to form CLNE, the Center for Leadership and Neighborhood Engagement. And we know CLNE can be like a tricky acronym. Sometimes Robin calls us Klein, which we've also, so we'll answer to both, CLNE, Klein, whatever is easier to remember. But we mobilize congregations and leaders as powerful neighborhood-based agents for positive social change and do that through transformative learning that strengthens and inspires, right? So that's part of what we're doing here on the IDI, but hopefully a lot more than that, right? And we value racial equity, taking an asset-based approach, right? So we can go into neighborhoods and see what's missing and we say, okay, but what is there? What's already here at Normandale? What's here that we get to build off of? You'll have incredible assets. Look at all of you wonderful people and all of your connections to Normandale and your years that you've been here, all that historical knowledge. Let's build on that. What do we know? What do we get to? And Lily's new energy and CYF, and there's good stuff. How do we build on what's already there instead of seeing what's missing? How do we shift from a culture of separation to one of belonging? It's really easy to live our isolated lives, which is and especially during COVID, it's been pretty isolated. How do we move into relationship and build those relationships by extending invitations and then learn not only through our books and our discussions and our lecture formats, but through experience and reflection. So the porch is an amazing example of that. Y'all have been not only taking what's going on in your life, but then reflecting on it and moving that into how you embody it every day. That's cool. Let's keep doing that stuff together. So that's a little bit about CLNE, and we're really excited to be partnering with you all, and hopefully you'll learn more. But we say don't just do the work, but be the work. So how do we embody it? How do we not just say, oh, I'm going to be the project, or I'm going to do the project, or I should read the book? No, how do we as a group embody this work together? Did you learn something new about somebody when we introduced each other? Oh, that's being that work, right? Like, how do we know each other? How do we move from separation to belonging in this space? How do we build relationships? How do we be curious about each other, not just out the window, but in our own building too, like, and doing both, right? It's not an either or, it's a both and. How do we be the work together? Dan, I'm going to pass it to you here.
All right, thanks. And I really appreciate move to my mark. Thank you. I constantly appreciate the difference between doing the work and being the work. I think I've grown up in a culture that emphasizes doing, always having things to do. And it really is a great reminder to kind of center on being and to realize that's the gift. The gift that I bring to a group of people or to a person is really being there with them. It's not always what I do. It's easy to focus on that, but being is where it's at. So what we're going to do with the rest of our time here, we are going to spend a little bit of time with how to engage each other, because really what we're doing begins with this group and with us being together, and how do we want to be together? And we've got a tool that we want to offer you. How do we engage with a broader community, which is a big part of the why that we heard earlier. How do we frame, how do we engage with the community? What is culture? The IDI is really all about intercultural competency. So what do we mean when we say culture? And to kind of give you some language and some ideas about that. Can we bring that slide back up, please? Yeah. And a big part of this is how we approach and navigate difference, cultural difference with our neighbors. And that's really what IDI really is a great tool for helping us with. And that'll get us to the last one, which is very practically what you all are interested in. What is the IDI and what do I do next? How do we move forward with this? So that's what we're going to do with our time, with the rest of our time. Let's go to the next one. So we'll start with how we're going to be together. So intentionally building our community. I would say we got a nice start, but with our introductions, kind of revealing a little bit about ourselves, particularly the bit about joy, what brings us joy. But when we're doing this kind of work and when we're being this kind of work, it's important to be intentional about how we interact with each other. And so we've got a tool that comes from a person named Eric Law, who teaches multicultural tools all over the place. And it's called a Respectful Conversation Guideline. So we take the word respect. Now, you may be familiar with the Aretha Franklin tune. So how does it go? S-P-C-T. Find out what it means to me. Find out what it means to me. That's an important part of it, because it doesn't mean you can't assume what respect means to somebody. You got to find out. So what we're going to do is spend a minute or two on this. So let's unpack this. R is for taking responsibility for what you say and feel and not blame others. So if you feel upset, if you feel defensive, that's okay. But you should own it, right? We each of us should own that. Kelly, you want to do?
Yeah. And on that, the way that we like to embody that is using I language. That's really easy to say we or they, or don't we all? No, just say I. Stand in that power of the I. There is a collective we, right? And that's important too, but use your I words like, oh, that makes me feel, I think. And we're going to use empathetic listening. For those of you in the room, sometimes it's a lot easier in the room sometimes to be like, ooh, I can sense that like Mark's body is doing something different. And I'm just going to pay attention to like, what might be happening with other people. Just, try to check in and notice what might be going on for other folks.
S is for sensitive, being sensitive to differences in communication styles. That shows up a lot when we're dealing with different cultures, but it also can be in a group that seems on the surface to be kind of the same. We know people who like to speak very linearly, bullet points. That was kind of how I grew up. Other people focus on telling the story, and they might circle around, and they might get to the point, or the point is somehow inferred in the story, and we might know people like that. And the point is to be sensitive to different people's styles of communication and appreciate that it's not necessarily like ours.
We're going to ponder what we hear and feel before we speak. So like maybe just take a breath to check in, and so that you can hone that I language too.
E for examine your assumptions and your perceptions. Assumptions we always make them. We always make them. And the key is not to try to avoid them or deny that we have assumptions about people, but to be aware of them and to examine them and say, that surprised me. I didn't know, what am I assuming about a person or a situation, and explore that internally. So that's an important part of respect.
C is for keeping confidentiality. And that's not like, oh, everything we talk about is a secret in here, right? It's for the good of the group. It's to say like, if Sumner shows up and says something really vulnerable, maybe you don't share that with everybody, or you check in with him before you do that, right? I give permission for Dan and I, you can share anything that we share, but amongst yourselves, just check in and don't be talking about people behind each other's backs. Oh, that's about keeping for the good of the community, confidentially for the good of the community.
And T is for trusting ambiguity. You might say trust the process, but that's kind of linear for what we do. So it's trusting that there's not necessarily a clear answer for a lot of the things we're talking about. And so it's to trust, to kind of be with whatever the feelings are, whatever the dialogue is, trust that and stick with it, to stay with it really more than anything else. Now I'd add to, so I guess, can I get your all's assent? Do we want to be this way tonight? All right, thumbs up. I would also offer this tool up for your group meetings. So when the racial justice team, REIT team meets,
RJ,
racial
justice equity team.
Thank you.
Right? RJET. Yeah. RJET.
RJET. Okay. You might consider this as a tool for being together and, a way to kind of elevate the quality of your gatherings.
Or for council.
And for
sometimes
council.
things in council can get tense because people come in with assumptions and perspectives. I'm on my church council, it's real. So how do we show up for each other in respectful ways? Is there anything you all want to add to this? We don't want to belabor it, and we think it's a great tool. And we recognize that there may be other needs in the room, online, things you might want to add. Recognizing power of silence, right? Not everybody's extroverted. Not everybody wants to process out loud. Some people want to take a little time and then process later. We welcome that. Stress, anxiety, trauma, transition. Woo, there's been a lot of stuff going on the last 2.5 years. I don't know where you were coming from before this. I don't know what happened in the beginning of your day or your week or your year. That shows up here, and we hold space for that.
The idea of rough drafts, which is a really valuable tool. Not everything that comes out of our mouths is going to be polished. And particularly with this kind of work where we're discovering new things and exploring new ideas, it's okay to just you might preface it by saying, I'm not exactly sure, but let me try this out. And to be patient with one another about that kind of thing, about sharing a rough draft of thinking. I mean, in fact, I think everything's a rough draft, right?
And Mark totally owned his rough draft earlier, which I appreciated.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So can we be this way together tonight? Online, Randy and Julia? Excellent. Perfect.
Love it. All right.
Okay, I think we can jump in now, right? And we're going to start with how to be in relationship, or how we want to be together in community. So a number of you have had experiences with being in relationship with the community, with the neighborhood around you and so forth. And here's just a picture of a relationship. And what kind of relationship does this look like? What kind of dynamics would you infer from this kind of relationship, where you've got God and God's story on one side, you've got us on the same side of the line as God and God's story. And on the other side of the line, you've got them, neighbors, people who aren't part of us. So what do you see when you see that kind of a relationship? Divisive? Yeah. It's kind of set up to be an us and them thing, right? What else?
Superiority.
Superiority. There's a sense of superiority. We've got God on our side, literally. I'm sorry. What? Yeah, they're not together. Yeah, and sometimes this is the posture. This is the kind of relationship and how we frame relationships with neighbor. With it kind of ties into the asset-based value that Kelly was talking about before. We think of people with needs. They don't have God. We've got God. We want to bring God to them. They've got issues, challenges, weaknesses. We've got strength, and we bring and we help and we save. We're part of what God's saving work is, and that is a kind of relationship. We are going to try to let's contrast that with another way of relating. This is a different way of relating. And what do you see that's different in this picture, in this idea of how to relate with neighbor?
God isn't any more with us than he is with everybody else.
There you go. God is all in all and around all, right? Yeah. Even what's the relationship between us and them? Do we see a difference there?
We could have just didn't have to have those circles,
That's true.
So the circles are still around us and them.
Yeah. And that's part of culture. I think we'll talk about what is culture. Culture does tend to say there is an us and there is a them, and
interconnection.
Yeah, there is an overlap there. Okay, so the word we want to use for that kind of relationship is accompaniment. An accompaniment, if you talk with any people about mission and so forth, it's a way of being in relationship with others. And some words that we use around it, being in a listening and relational posture towards our neighbor. So rather than thinking that we know what's best, we're accompanying, we're walking alongside our neighbor, we're listening. We are walking together in mutual interdependence. We need our neighbor just as much as they need us. And we all need God. And together we can be a source of welcome, safety, and belonging. And CLNE kind of anchors on those ideas of welcome, safety, and belonging as God's mission. And also in language that doesn't necessarily sound like church. So we want all of our neighborhoods, all of our communities to be places where people feel welcome, they feel safe, and they have a sense of belonging. So this is what we're aspiring to, is an accompanying relationship. Now the thing is, people are not the same. We have cultural differences, and so when we're accompanying people, there's the opportunity for tension, and because there's difference. Difference is the way God created all of us. The question is not, can we all be the same or be one way? The question is, how do we navigate cultural difference? So I'd like to take a few minutes, take 3 or 4 minutes, and talk with the people around you, next to you, maybe in twos, maybe just in
twos
pairs.
or threes, whatever
Yeah.
feels natural as you kind of break apart.
And name for yourself, what are the differences that you find in your life and in your work, in your congregation, and in your neighborhood? So just whatever the kinds of differences. We're not just talking about race here. So differences.
And
Okay, so-
Julie and Randy, maybe y'all can confer together. I don't know how that works exactly with the sound, but Lauren, I'm sure will figure it out for me.
Talk amongst yourselves, yes. So just take 2 or 3 minutes, okay? And then we'll share back.
Well, I'm ready to
It took us
talk
a long
about
time to get to something interactive.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
a difference. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I moved back to South Minneapolis after being gentrified out, and after all my neighborhood was gentrified out, and my people and the downwardly mobile by choice people and the artsy artists or the wannabe artists, or I mean the artists that get all the public funding that are politically correct. So, you know, the blonde dreadlocks people and the puppet people who are so progressive and anti-racist, and they can't see classism in front of their face anyways. So the blacks, the natives, the Latinx people, and Hmong, all of us got gentrified out of South Minneapolis, and for some strange joke God played on me, I needed to move back there to be close to my grandchildren, to help the new parents who just adopted all 4 of them. So I sit on my porch and look at all the Black Lives Matter signs, and there's no black people. And I'm like, God, you are just gonna have to help me, because I need your help. I don't like these people. I got those people too. And it's not just Lutherans and Scandinavians, you know? So, you know, I'm on my porch smoking cigarettes, hoping I look too damn politically incorrect for them to bother me. But it isn't working. They found out a famous person moved on the block. So I gave my book to the school teacher, because, you know, I love teachers. I always want to pour into teachers because they nurture our babies. And then her husband came over and her to invite me to the block party. And he said, I thought I was going to get guilt tripped reading your book. And he said, I'm laughing and crying my way through it, and I'm loving it. I'm learning so much from your perspective. So the differences, I'm wrestling with them, but I'm also allowing my own transformation to happen. And okay, that's enough. You know, I can go on and on. So that's my thing right now.
My thing, well, I think about the differences in my world. the one that's just the most troubling to me now is the political antagonisms and tribalism. Is just, I don't even raise political. I love talking about. I love politics. I've always loved talking about it. I don't anymore. I mean, if I feel my way and conclude it's safe, but it can be so not disruptful. I don't know what the right word is. Disrupting. So that's a big one. Wealth is a big one. You know, I live in a world where I'm around a lot of wealthy people and people who are not. You know, I'm not around the racial differences. I live in a very white neighborhood in Edina. But the two that I think are the most stark in my day-to-day life are wealth and political, cultural, you know, antagonisms.
Bring us back together. Can I ask you all to?
I love the energy in here.
Yes.
Y'all like to talk to each other. I like it.
Love the
I
dialogue.
know, I like it.
So let's share some of the fruit of your discussion here. So I'm going to start with the back row over here. Just what are some differences that you notice? Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Lauren.
We can't hear.
This and assume that we are all alike. And there are ways in which many of us are alike. We have grown up similarly, have similar educational backgrounds, church backgrounds, professional backgrounds. But when you start doing this, right, the respect conversation, you begin to realize that there are differences. There are many differences of opinion, differences in orientations, differences socioeconomically. And so that's one of the things that I'm really trying to do as a new person here, is to converse and to listen.
Right.
And to not assume that, oh yeah, this is just, I know exactly what this is and who we are.
Right. So you're paying attention and kind of on the discovering. Yeah, let's pass it around. So how about back here?
Someplace back here.
Someplace new.
Hey, can we see the
kind of
people that are
differences
talking?
in your congregation or in your,
well, congregation generational
Yep.
is a real obvious one that, and we're a congregation from birth to 100 years old, so on a regular basis. And I would say political.
Okay.
And across the last few years, that's been even more notable.
Right. More
and
noticeable.
more out in front and awareness of that.
Okay. Thank you.
Someone up front want to say?
Yeah, you want to?
Oh, I like that. Yeah, hot potato with the mic there.
Here, let's bring it up here.
I live at the Calhoun Beach Club in the north end of Lake Calhoun, and we were talking about cultural differences. And I said, well, if I want to be in the majority, I walk around Lake of the Isles, which is just to the north. If I want to be part of the minority, I walk Lake Calhoun.
Oh, interesting.
And it's really distinct. It's really quite different, the two lakes.
What are some of the differences you notice between those two groups of people besides the lake that they walk around?
Well, you know, there are an awful lot more Muslims around Lake Calhoun.
So religious differences.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And
Right.
it's interesting. You know, it's a different walk with people, and they're kids and bicyclists and the same kind of groupings. You know, family walking.
So
but-
some similarities in the way
Yeah.
they're actually going
Yeah.
about their life.
Mhm.
Yeah, but the obvious differences too.
Yeah, and it's almost comical. You walk around Lake of the Isles, you're lily white. It just changes when you go to Calhoun. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I realize.
Anybody up front? You've got, I didn't mean to.
Or Lily, or yeah, the corner over here.
Yeah.
We just got talking about neighborhoods at the end of our time there. And we were both kind of talking about neighbors that have like maybe different religious or language culture at their home. And especially in my neighborhood, it's pretty obvious around the holidays who celebrates Christmas and who maybe that isn't a part of their religion based on how they decorate and when it is that their house has lights on it. And that's been really interesting for me, especially as I was teaching and kind of learning about all the different holidays that were represented in my students. So that's been like a big thing for me that I'm learning about.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks. Let me take this. And so far, what have we heard? We've heard differences that need to be discovered, that are sort of below the surface and not apparent. You know, and you mentioned a couple: socioeconomic, I would say maybe level of education is one. We've talked about age. We've talked about religion. We've talked about ethnicity. Any others? Did y'all come up with any other differences? Yeah.
Well, one thing is within the congregation, a big difference of those that believe we need a racial justice and equity effort and those who don't.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So that.
I would say in our neighborhood, we've got two young people who are a part of the LGBTQ community.
Sure.
And that's been fun for us. The one who's right across the street is also Jewish. Her mom is Black, and she loves to talk to Paul about religion. And she wants to come in here and preach, and that's been kind of fun. So we haven't really talked with them about their coming out stories. One is very recent, and the other one hasn't really shared that with us. But her mom tells us everything. So.
All right. All right. Yeah. So orientation, then sexual orientation. Yeah.
Can you repeat that? Because I don't.
Yeah, I know. I was holding the mic. I didn't get the mic back there.
It's for the Zoom folks. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that we have two neighbors. We have two neighbor children. One's a senior in high school, one's a junior in high school, and they both have recently in the last couple of years come out and are a member of the LGBTQ community. One is also Jewish and kind of questioning that, I think, a little bit right now. And the other one we haven't heard about. She hasn't shared that with us really, but I just think that's important to recognize that we have these children around us that are feeling this freedom now. And it's quite lovely, you know, to be able to see that they feel the freedom to be who they really are and not feel judged by it.
Yeah. Wonderful.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe Dan, just leave the microphone back there.
Yeah, good idea. And then you all
Y'all
can
can
be
help.
responsible for passing it. That's right. Okay. Very good. So we've named a lot of differences. I don't know that there is a limited list. There's as many differences as there are groups of people. But it's important to realize, especially since you're starting at it from a racial justice standpoint, that that's just one of many, many differences, cultural differences that overlap and that are in combination with each other. So just bear that in mind when we start talking about culture, which is what we're going to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
So a little exercise. Sometimes when we have a lot of time, we'll do this in breakouts, but I'm just going to kind of do the popcorn style and say, these are metaphors. Culture, it's good to talk about when we say, what is culture? It's kind of a big idea. But how is culture like an onion? Can some just say some ways, or one way that culture is like an onion?
Got a lot of layers.
Yeah, we're gonna have to pass the microphone around. We'll be disciplined about
It
that.
has a lot of layers, and if you don't peel back the layers, you're not going to find out what's inside.
There you go.
Makes
Okay.
me think of like the Shrek donkey layers. Yeah. Thanks.
You have another one?
Yes, it can be intense and it can cause eye-watering and reaction.
Yes.
Indeed.
I like it.
Lovely. Any other onions? Any other onion thoughts?
Those are great onion
Yeah.
thoughts.
What, it's smell and flavor, right? Without an onion, it's missing something, right? Okay. All right. Next question would be, let's go down. We'll talk about a fish bowl. How is culture like a fish bowl? How about online? How about Randy or Julia? How is culture like a fish bowl?
Put them on the spot.
I know, I'm putting
Dan.
you on the spot.
That's a tough one. Julia?
Well, you heard the story about the fish when they were asked, how's the water? And they said, what water?
Exactly. Thank you, Julia. That's right. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to when we talk about, well, what is your culture? And they say, I don't have a culture. I'm just normal. And it's just the goldfish in the bowl. And that's something to bear in mind. The fish doesn't know, but you can also imagine that's not the only fish bowl around, right? Yes, can you give this gentleman a microphone? There you go.
It's Greg.
Yes,
Greg.
it's also that we're looking into it.
Yeah.
And we're not in it. We're simply looking into it.
We're looking in it and it's looking out
Out
through
at
it, right? It's looking through the water and the glass at everything else around it. So it's how it perceives the world is totally shaped by the culture.
Correct.
How about lens? That's a nice segue into the lens.
Ditto. No.
Yeah. What can you say about how is culture like a lens?
Very easy to change.
You think so? All right, yeah. Swap it out, get that infrared to zoom in. Okay. Okay. It's changeable, that's for sure. Yes. Uh-huh. Well, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to judge, but I apologize.
Oh.
Narrow, yep. Some cultures. Indeed. Yeah.
And it has a lot to do with the perception of the eye. So looking out, you will see different things depending upon what you're focusing on.
Right. Wonderful. And then last one, the last metaphor we've got, which isn't up there right now, but it's the iceberg. And I'm wondering if there are a few things you can say about how is culture like an iceberg? Anybody? That's the.
I feel like we'll repeat what Pastor Rebecca said, which was so much hidden
Can we get
underneath.
the microphone over here? So much hidden underneath.
Right? Who's watched Titanic? They didn't crash because they could see what was above the water line, right?
Yeah.
It's the stuff underneath.
Right. And so an iceberg is a real common metaphor to think about culture because you can see things on the top. And when we go to that slide, actually, there are things that are visible that are above the water line. We can think of that as surface culture, sometimes folk culture. If you go to a culture festival, you're going to see these things: art, music, food, dancing, these things that are just expressions of culture. You go to Disney World and you go to the Epcot Center, they've got a whole big thing, you know, which is different countries, and that's what you see. What you don't see is and as the graphic shows you, it's out of awareness. It's what's driving that. What is the deep culture? And you can see just some of the things in here that are the root of what is expressed as culture. There's values about things like modesty and beauty and decision making and child rearing, leadership. Things are culturally formed and different, often different than you know, from one group to another. And so even though you might see families going around the lake, they have children, what they want for their children might be very different than what you and I want for our children or what I want for my children, even though we would all say we want our children to be happy and successful or something like that, right? So that's when discovery is important. So we can see the things above the waterline, below the water, where the real work comes in.
And it's usually where that crashing happens, right? I make a joke about the Titanic, but it's that like, ooh, I feel a rub here. And I don't know why I feel a rub here, right? And that might happen between Normandale and CLNE too. Like, ooh, I feel a rub here. Like we do things differently than you do. And we got to like figure out how to work together in that. What's under the water level? And these cultural icebergs exist on meta levels, like these big levels, right? And race and ethnicity being part of them, but they also exist in our organizations, our family structures, right? If we think about Normandale, and I don't know you all that well yet, right? So, well, how do you refer to your pastors, right? Do you call them, you know, is it Pastor Gamble? Is it Rebecca? Is it Pastor Rebecca? Is it Bex? Is it, you know, how do you refer to each other? But, and how is that informed by authority?
Mhm.
How is it informed by how we think about elders? How is it informed
Right.
by education? How is it informed by relationship? You know, what are the ways that we talk about each other? Like that's an above the water level, but it's usually informed by like, how do we want to be in relationship to our pastors, right? Or what do we think about that office? So there's cultural icebergs that exist all over, and why culture matters, right? So why is this? I know that we've got a group of folks that are really, you know, focused on racial justice and equity, and that's a part of this. And culture is way bigger than that too, right? When we talk about the IDI or intercultural capacity work, that's like some of that groundwork that helps us lean into the systemic work, right? Because inclusion and belonging occur when people are working together effectively and our differences feel valued and engaged. Brene Brown talks about how the opposite of fitting in is belonging, right? There's a difference between fitting in a place and feeling like you belong. And in order to have people feel like they belong, we have to understand what's going on with our differences that show up. Even if, like Greg pointed out, even if they're not obvious, but what are our capacities to shift perspectives? Generationally, maybe? What is our capacity to notice what's going on for the other people in our community and make this a community for all of us that works together? So intercultural competence is the how. That capacity work is the how we get to inclusion and belonging. And equity work is culture work. Systemic change is culture work because we made up our systems based on our culture. And so the more nuance and capacity you have to understand all that stuff under the water level, the more effective you're going to be in that culture shift and that systemic shift, right? So it's all connected. The IDI is a really the IDI, the tool itself is a really teeny part of that. But we hope it helps to kind of build that groundwork for all of this. That feels like a lot. So a little levity here. Why culture matters. I don't know if you can read this at the bottom, but it says, inadvertently, Roy dooms the entire earth to annihilation when in attempt to be friendly, he seizes their leader by the head and shakes vigorously because the head looks like a hand. That's it, right? That's how we greet each other, but maybe you're shaking people by the head and you don't realize it because, we haven't built out all of that capacity to understand what's under the water level.
Roy's cultural lens says, shake people by this thing that looks like a hand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we want to, I love that you guys love talking to each other. And we may be pushing a culture of time. I recognize it's 6:44. So we may go, 5 minutes to the right. Hopefully you're all okay with that. But we would love to have you talk a little bit about what's a piece of your own cultural iceberg and or what's a piece of Normandale's cultural iceberg, right? That maybe feels like a big question. Top or bottom? Maybe what's something that you could see at the top and what might be under the water? If you are here with us in person, on the backside of Respectful Communications is that iceberg. So that might be helpful, or maybe it's the other page. That might be helpful if you want to think about that, but we'll give you, 5 minutes, Dan? It's going to be short.
Sure.
Brief, 5 minutes.
Let's say 3, and then we want to debrief a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Go.
Sorry. The white time priority is strong in me.
Can you hear me, Julia? I'll tell one of my cultural icebergs is I grew up in Pierre, South Dakota, which is, on the border of kind of rural eastern South Dakota, kind of like Minnesota, and the Wild West. And it is, I didn't realize it at the time, but it's one of the most segregated places in the world. No African Americans, but Native Americans, of course. And I'll tell you this story when we do on one-on-one in more detail, but I think back about the very limited interactions I had as a kid with Native American kids, and there was one that was very significant. And in retrospect, I learned a lot about racism from it. The problem is I didn't really figure it out till about 5 years ago. And I realized how my culture at the time and my social and political surroundings made it impossible for me to have a relationship other than on a baseball field with this boy who was a very great kid. And I would have loved to have known him for the rest of his life. When this process started, I decided, well, I'm going to try to find him. Just see if I went on Google. He died last year. And it's been sticking in my brain, this whole thing, ever since we've been doing this. And it just made me realize how powerful. Well, it's also made me realize how racism is not just about dislike or hatred. It's about that cultural, institutional things that impose on you and you don't even know it. And it's a powerful, powerful thing, culture. You're on mute.
And cultural superiority.
Yeah. And we didn't even think about that. It's just, the Indian kids, they're out there or they're in the reservation or whatever. So, and I know, because I'm starting to figure out, I know there's so much more that I haven't figured out yet. That's part of my iceberg.
I was so lucky. My best friends in grade school were Native American and Black.
Yeah.
And I was the poor white trash girl. And we were a clique,
I thought a lot about this week because I was actually there last week. That's where I picked up COVID, I'm quite sure. But for some family and friends interaction. And anyway, this brought back a lot of memories about that and a lot of thinking about that. I had many hours on the road that I could think about it. So I was very naive about racism for a long, long time.
Well, it's set up for you to stay that way. That's one of the functions of it.
Right.
Keep people ignorant.
Yeah.
It's very pervasive.
Yeah.
Okay, can I get your attention? And let's share back. Okay, everybody. Let's I gotta start using the faith and neighboring practices stuff.
I know, I feel like you're gonna have to use kindergarten teacher methods. Like, if you can hear me, touch your nose. If you can hear me, touch your ears.
If you can hear me, clap your hands. If you can hear me, clap your hands. Okay, it works. Always works. Okay, thank you all for how wonderfully engaged you are in talking about, bringing this to life and bringing this into your own life. Can I get just a couple of examples that you came up with about your cultural iceberg? Yeah. So whoever has the mic should go first.
Oh.
Bex has
Bex. Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca. I'm sorry, Pastor Rebecca.
Pastor Rebecca. Yeah.
The one I shared is that our yard looks like a mess because we're transitioning it into Minnesota native plants. And we've got solar panels on our roof, which some folks feel are quite the eyesore. But I think under the waterline is the value of attempting to live a little more sustainably for future generations.
Awesome. And you're kind of rubbing up against the sort of culture, kind of nice, neat lawn culture. Yeah, that's a strong one. Thank you. Who can talk about another one of their culture, your own culture?
Oh.
Okay, here we've got one here on demand.
Nancy has been volunteered.
Turn up the volume.
My daughter graduated from Shasta High School this year, and there were about 500 people there, and the principal asked
We can't hear.
to save our applause until the end.
We can't hear.
Molly component.
We can't hear.
Cheered and stamped and yelled and waved, and you couldn't even hear the next person after. And so I was sitting there
feeling annoyed at the same time as I was knowing about my work here.
Oh.
And thinking, and then I talked to Julia the next day and I was telling her about it. And she said, Nancy,
imagine that they've never had anyone in their family ever get a high school diploma. So it was a great time for me to have my come up.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we've got another one over here. And then I'd like to hear some Normandale cultural iceberg stuff too. So whichever one you've got, Bill.
Well, I'll do Normandale because I used to work with Normandale House and I used to get volunteers for reading buddies, which would be the high school kids and junior high.
Okay.
And a lot of them were doing it for service project going down. But as they went down, a matter of kids down in the Phillips neighborhood, they couldn't wait to go down there. And some of the parents saying, well, it's a Phillips neighborhood, it's a rough neighborhood. Yeah, it is. But people are people. And when you're down there and the kids so much fun and they find out that these kids that don't have been moved from school to school, so they're bullied and all this stuff because they're behind. And then they have a high school student say, you're doing fine. It's just tremendous. And to see God work through that. It's just, it's been a joy to do that. But the kids that stare up and they couldn't wait to come back. So, you know, like you say, that's below the surface. What you see in the front, well, you know, it's, you know, how driving down there at night, you know, going through there in the dark. But when you get down there, the kids, it's such a joy to see what they're, you know, what the kids do. And so what Normandale was down there, it's just tremendous.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm hearing below the water level, maybe a culture, you know, a value of curiosity and looking for commonality, looking for what's the same about us, right? And building those bridges. Thank you. One more. Let's do one more.
Normandale music.
Oh, I feel like saying more.
What about the music? Just that it's important, or okay.
And that we hear for 3 minutes on a Sunday without understanding that music is part of the culture.
Okay.
It
Thank
may be below the line too, but
Right.
it's above the line.
Yeah, that'd be a good discussion for you all at some point. Say, how does your culture below the waterline show up in the music that you hear and you play and you worship
Especially
with?
as you have Greg in the room
Yeah.
too.
Sure, Greg might have a perspective on that at some point, but yeah.
We had a couple. One sort of relates to music, actually, because we identified music, which is emotion. That is a culture of quite measured and controlled, not imposing your emotions on others. And even within music, one could say that it's rather controlled and rather measured. Another one was service. And I said that as an above the line. And then we thought about it and said, you know, you actually have to kind of dig. You have to actually talk to people. You have to go out and see it. It's not in evidence when you walk into this environment. So, and then another one was time. And just the one that people value their time quite a bit. And you make assumptions about time and using their time at your peril.
At your peril.
At your peril.
That's what we do.
Exactly. Now, Kelly, acknowledge that might be, and all you have to do is acknowledge that. But anyway.
We talk about in our, RESPCT, find out what it means to me. And then the chorus is sock it to me, sock it to me, sock it to me. And when we don't have these conversations, it ends up socking it to us. And the at your peril, I feel like is that we don't acknowledge the time thing. People might, start getting antsy in their chairs and they'll be like, oh, we never want to go to one of those things again because they always go long. And so I think that was great.
Yeah. Thank you for
and
going
that's an
deep.
invitation to keep digging into that, right? That's not an end, that's the beginning. And so moving that into the tool, the IDI, you were going to introduce the tool.
Yes. So the Intercultural Development Inventory, it's really a tool that is used not just in churches. It really came out of the corporate world. And it was a way of giving teams who were going to be working across cultures a way of understanding how do they navigate cultural differences, both for themselves, how do they understand their own culture, and how do they relate to other cultures. So it's let's go to the, here we go. So what it is and what it is not, we're going to kind of go through this. It's an online assessment. You all are going to take an online assessment. It's 50 questions. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes.
If it takes longer than that, it's because you're thinking way too hard.
You are overthinking it. Yep.
Yeah. You're trying to get the right answer.
It's been used and validated across about dozens of countries and different cultures around the world. It's used as a benchmarking tool. And what that means is you can take it over and over again. It's used often in the education sphere for like study abroad programs. So they'll give students IDI on the, before they go, then they'll have their cultural experience and then they'll come back and they'll take the IDI again and try to hopefully measure some growth and some change. It's also used in churches in the same way. Some of you might have run into this in your corporate work too. It's there all the time. It's focused on intercultural competency. I like the word Kelly used, capacity, which is, so it's a measuring stick more than anything else. Think of this as, it's not going to teach you much. It's just going to measure where you are and where you think you are. Basically, it's those things. It's done for individuals and for groups. And so we'll be able to look at both your individual, you'll have an individual IDI profile and a plan, development plan, but we'll also be able to talk about as a group, how does the group show up? And that's an important dimension. There's actually a lot of insight that comes out of how does a group operate based on their orientation. It's confidential, so we aren't sharing your document with anybody else or the conversation. You'll have individual debrief conversations with one of us or one of the people that are on the team that Kelly shared. Let me go up to what it's not. It's not a test. Maybe it's semantics between assessment and test, but what I have found is that when people think of it as a test, they think they can fail it. They think that it's a right and a wrong answer. Or they can ace it. And we all like to ace things, right?
So I feel like there's a high achieving culture around here. So.
So it's a dipstick. It's a measurement. So it's not a measure of your worth. And that's an important thing because sometimes people will take this personally, particularly based on the experiences and how they feel like, what they've done in the past.
And guess what? We're created in the image by God, no matter how you show up on the IDI. This has nothing to, that doesn't value, like you are worthy no matter how you're showing up. And that's a duality that I think is hard for us to live into sometimes with the IDI in our white achievement oriented culture, but you're perfect the way you are. And there's an invitation to keep growing, right? It's both and.
And along those lines, it's not going to tell you, you can't see it on the slide here, but it's not going to tell you if you're any kind of ist. We talked about differences. Some people, depending on how this thing gets framed, it's not going to tell you if you're racist or if you're ageist or if you're homophobic or anything like that. It doesn't do that. So don't bring that to it. When you see your profile, just realize it's just helping you understand how you relate to cultural differerences. And it's not doing the work. One of the things you'll get from the results is a plan, which is your development plan. If you feel like you want to grow in your own intercultural capacity, that plan is more like the work. Taking the assessment is not the work itself. So that's
and the one you couldn't see is that it's not a way to know if you've won the Intercultural Olympics. You don't get the laurel, you don't get the gold star, you don't get the medal. And the reality in terms of the IST stuff, there are folks that, assess in, this way, adaptation, which is the most intercultural mindset, that are still, my colleague, and excuse my cursing, my colleague Richard calls them intercultural assholes. Like they can be adaptive, but that doesn't mean they're self-actualized, right? Like you can have capacity and not live into it all of the time. And you can be shown up in denial, which is the most monocultural mindset, and be a wonderful person to be in community with, right? Like that all exist together, which is confusing, I know, but that's the reality. This is the continuum that'll show up as you take the IDI. So there's 5 orientations along that continuum. The 2 on the left, denial and polarization, are monocultural mindsets. The 2 on the right, acceptance and adaptation, are intercultural mindsets. And minimization in the middle is this transitional stage between mono and inter. And about 68% of folks that take the IDI assess in minimization. So we're going to put that, it's a bell curve, right? And recognizing that means that most of our churches and institutions and workplaces and schools are attuned to that space of minimization where we're connecting on commonality, right? That's our main focus is on commonality. We may de-emphasize difference by doing that. And we find a lot of connection points, and that's where we lean into. So that's the IDI. I'm going to get into what we do with it next, but what questions do you have about that? Like that very brief framing? You will get way more. Yes. Tell me your name again. I'm so sorry. Linda, thank you.
As a group,
Oh, microphone.
when we look at the group,
Thank you.
will that be every single person at Normandale that takes it this time around?
Thank you. Yes. So the question was, when we look at it as a group, like what will those results look like? So yes, you will get an individual report that'll lay out like kind of how you're showing up. And it shows us where we aspire to be and maybe how we are more regularly, our developmental orientation. And then if there's any gap between those two. And the same thing will happen for the group at Normandale. Everybody that takes it, we can look at how do you as a group aspire to show up in similarity and difference, and how might you be doing that? And is there a difference between those two things? The spoiler alert is that there's probably a difference between those two things. There usually is. And we can break those things down into like, if you want to look at how council is showing up as a group, how RJED is showing up as a group, we won't break it down in a number that's any smaller than 5 people because we want to keep it confidential, especially for employees. I don't know, there's the power dynamics there, but we can we can break out the groups too. Is that, yeah, perfect. What other questions? Randy and Julia, do you have any questions? No.
And does the output, you get the output from the counseling person or the
Yes.
Oh,
person
thank you, Mark.
Not instant feedback.
Thank
on
you,
the,
Mark. It's
instant
not
results.
instant feedback. So what will happen in terms of the IDI tool is that I've got all your contact information for Pastor Rebecca. So you'll get an email from me tomorrow. If you do not get an email from me tomorrow, please check your spam because I often get sent there. And if you still don't have an email from me, please either email me or email Pastor Rebecca and or Mark, and they'll make sure that you get it. And what's going to come in that email is your login information for the IDI. We're aiming for you to complete it by August 18th. So that gives you about 2 weeks. Again, 15 to 20 minutes. If it takes longer than that, you're thinking way too hard. So go with your gut, right? Once you take the assessment, we'll have you sign up for a 45-minute individual debrief. We use Sign Up Genius to do that. So you can sign up with anybody from our team. If there isn't a time listed that works for you, again, let me know and we'll make sure that there's a time for you. In that 45-minute session is when you'll get your kind of feedback. We'll send it to you 24 hours before we meet. You can choose to look at it or not look at it. We don't give you more than 24 hours so that you don't sit and stew in it without any time to process it. So that if you're having a mental breakdown that you are not reaching your fullest potential of how you should show up in the world, you've got a space to talk about it, right? So you'll sign up for that 45-minute debrief, have it with one of our team. Before you have that debrief, this is so many instructions, I know. It will all be laid out in a nicely bulleted email also. And we'll send you lots of reminders, but there will be a practical applications of the IDI video that we'll send you. It's a 26-minute video and it's really helpful. It looks super corporate-y, but it will ground our conversation and help ground in a lot of examples about how the intercultural continuum shows up in the world, what it might feel like in different orientations. So we ask you to watch that video before your debrief so that you can come with kind of a bit more grounding and we can have a deeper conversation. And you'll get that, the IDI report and your individual plan will send you 24 hours in advance. And then we'll all come back together to talk about how the group is showing up. I don't know if we've scheduled that yet, but we will. So that'll probably be in September, late September, early October, so that you've got time to get your individual debrief in. So, it's a lot of instructions. That was a very long answer to your question, Mark.
You're going to get an email from Kelly.
You will. You will get an email from me and all of it will be repeated in there and we'll repeat it many more times. What questions do you have about that? Kelly. You're like, just send me the email, Kelly, and I'll make sure.
Kelly. Kelly.
Oh, Randy, yeah.
Are the debriefs going to be remote or?
I can't hear you. Oh, sorry, Lauren.
Are the
All right, there you are, Randy.
are the debriefs going to be remote or in person?
Oh,
Good
that's a
question.
great question. We have been doing them on Zoom. If you prefer to do them in person, we can talk about that, but we've generally been doing them remotely. We find it's most convenient for everybody that way. You can pop in and if you're working during the day too.
Right. And we have slots with all different types of it, morning slots, lunchtime slots, after work slots, weekend, a few weekend slots.
Mm-hmm.
Is the output something that
Mm.
is easy to convey to other people? So other people that have taken the IDI, it sounds like sort of 5 dimensions, right? So you can talk about where you are on these different dimensions, and other people who took it will understand. It's relatively simple that way.
Hopefully.
I would say, yeah.
If we've done our jobs, hopefully.
Okay, yeah.
And if
Hopefully,
the other person is not only taking it, but they're kind of into,
Right.
they've kind of grasped where they're at.
I mean, we could pull the Sumner and Rebecca who've taken the IDI too, if they feel it, but I won't put you on the spot. But yes, hopefully you can. And when we do that group debrief, we'll talk about like, what does it mean for Normandale to be showing up the way Normandale might be showing up, both aspirationally and in reality, like what's going on there and what invitations might be coming up for the congregation. And so hopefully, even if you haven't taken the IDI, you can still talk about those things, right? All right. What other questions? Otherwise, we're only a couple minutes late, which I feel good. We started a couple minutes late. So the tyranny of time, and I am pretty polychronic about my time. It takes as long as it takes, but I feel the pressure from other people that are time oriented to get it done in a timely fashion. All right.
I feel it deep in my gut. Anyway, yes.
All right. Do you want to pray us out?
I'll do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
So we're going to share, this is under the banner of Why Does Culture Matter, but this is a prayer by a woman named Cole Arthur Riley. And I don't know if there are any Instagram people here, but she's got a wonderful feed called Black Liturgies. And she just published a book called This Here Flesh, which is also amazing. So it's a great source for prayers. And this one really fits what we're doing here. So I'm going to pray this. Yeah, let's breathe. God of the multitude, we praise you for being a God who contains a diversity of personhood in one. In your very being, you possess a sacred community where each part is distinct and beautiful and necessary. Make our community like you, that we would no longer be content with the bland flavor of sameness, that we would no longer use language of unity and oneness as a veil for the suppression of voice, body, and culture. Be near to those who have offered up the particularity of their stories to bring about restoration, only to be met with accusations of divisiveness. Lord, let our distinct beauty be held as a sacred and necessary contribution to the beauty of the cosmos. Lead us into spaces that see and honor that we are not the same, and it is very good. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
So with that, yeah, thank you all.
Just a thank you to both of you, Kelly and Dan, for the ways that you have graciously led us through this and will in days and weeks and months to come.
Yeah.
And what you don't know is that they went above and beyond and were helping me shuffle tables and chairs and bring down snacks today. So if we could give them a little extra thanks. We're so grateful. Thank you so much. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah. And thanks.
Give it up for Lauren for handling the
thanks,
hybrid meeting.
Lauren.
All right.
Good to see you, Julia and Randy. We're waving at
Bye-bye.
you too. Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's sweet.
Wish I could be there.
Yeah, feel
fun.
better.
Feel better, yeah.
Have fun, anybody who's going out together afterwards.
Yeah.
Where you guys going?
Oh.
The hilltop.
Have fun.
You are welcome to join.
Is that I don't know about the hilltop. All right.
You're welcome.
I love that.
Thank you very much.
All right. Oh my gosh. Thank you.
I thought that was really good. It was interactive. And you know, I have ADHD. I get bored so easily. So I was not tempted to get bored.
Bye, Julia.
All right, later. Look forward to talking to you more on a one-on-one.
Okay, we'll get it scheduled.
All right.
Goodbye, Julia. Thanks for coming.
Who am I talking to? Who is that? Hello?